Hello everyone. So I have yet another card. I just posted one last night. And then right after I made that card, I started making this card for this week's Bellerific Friday challenge, which was a sketch, which I will show in a little bit. But to meet the sketch, I decided to use the Uptown Girl bunny and her daffodil image, and I stamped it onto some Copic quality 110-pound white cardstock with my favorite things, black licorice hybrid ink. And then while I had the ink out and the stamp inked up with the black, I inked it up again and I'm just stamping it onto some pattern paper, and I'll get into the pattern paper in a bit as well. I'm going to set that aside. I'll get to that later. So stamp the image onto the white cardstock, and then I'm going to die cut it with the largest of MFT's Pierced Circle Stacks Dynamics. And I'm just going to tape it into place with a little bit of micropore tape just to hold it in place so that it doesn't shift while I run it through my machine. I'm not too concerned about that, but you never know. I've had people make comments like asking why I bother die cutting before coloring, all that sort of thing. With this type of an image and this type of die cut, it's not as big of a deal because you can see I have plenty of space to color. But with smaller images that have, the matching dies, so they just, die cut the image with a little bit of a border, I get a lot of people asking, like, why do you die cut and then color? Mostly because I am paranoid about going to all the work and then running it through my machine after I've colored, and then it just, shifting or whatever, and then die cutting it weird, and then I've wasted all that time coloring. Because I have that kind of luck. Even when it's taped in place and I use a magnetic mat and all that kind of stuff, that is the sort of things that happen to me, so I'd rather be safe than sorry. So yeah, it's just habit for me to always stamp, die cut, then color. So for this image, I'm using my Copic markers to color, and starting with the skin, which was always my first step. Again, a habit. Although I've changed that habit recently I've shown the last couple of videos, I've started going darkest to lightest instead of lightest to darkest, then back again. So far so good. I still kind of mix, like, out of habit, do lightest to darkest here and there as well. It just, yeah, old habits are hard to break, especially coloring ones that I've been doing for, 8 years, 9 years, however long it's been that I've been using Copics. But yeah, it's fun to sometimes mix it up a little bit and try something different. So I did her skin, and then her hair I did super pale yellow, kind of thinking platinum blonde here. And yeah, kept all the coloring really simple. That is something I've said over and over again, especially with these images. They're kind of daunting when you look at them. They're so detailed. There's so much going on, all that kind of thing. And it took me a really long time to kind of get over it, but I just try not to overthink it and just get the color on. It's, in the end, it does not need to be perfect. You do not have to stress about not going over every little line because, there's such fine little, finicky details with these stamps, which makes them unique, but also can make them a pain to color unless you want to go really slow. And me and my OCD, of course, that kind of thing usually bugs me, but I find when you're done coloring them, it really doesn't matter. Like, just get the color on. In the end, they look great. They're so cute. They kind of stand for themselves. So I left the bulk of her skirt blank, obviously, because I'm going to paper piece that. And then the rest of it, I used just a ton of different colors to match the pattern papers I'm going to be using to color in the egg. And then I colored in this bottom area of her skirt just so I don't have to paper piece those parts. Because again, it's easier. It's easier to color it than it would be to finicky cut out, all those little scallops or anything. I was like, oh, forget that. So the little dash line that's already like part of the image was a perfect guide. So I just made sure to color past that. And then I colored the top of her dress, and then decided to color this little band here too, to have it color and just differentiate it a little bit from the pattern paper I'm going to use. So once I've got all my color down, I'm going to trim out this portion of her skirt here. And this is the most finicky part, but obviously I keep it simple by following that little dash line. And then the other lines of her skirt are super easy to cut. I just take my time. This is harder to do when I'm trying to keep it on, like, in the camera to show. Because usually I kind of hold it up closer to my face. It's just easier that way. But I cut just on the line, basically. You don't want any kind of hanging over, like, extra paper outside the lines. So I cut just on the line, and then I took some warm gray markers and added a little bit of shading to give it a little bit of depth so that the pattern paper isn't just floating there. And then as a final step, I just take my Memento marker, the black one, and go along all the edges, and that just covers up the white edges from the pattern paper and gives it a more finished look. So once I was done with that, I've got to adhere this over the stamped image. So I just use a bit of my Tombow Mono Multi and making sure not to glob on too much glue, because you do not want glue oozing out the sides of the pattern paper and just making a mess. You just need enough to adhere it down fully, and then you've got a few seconds of wiggle room to make sure it's kind of placed properly before the glue officially sets, and then it's done. So once I've got that in place, I'm going to take those same warm gray markers and add just a little bit of shading and depth around the image just to make it pop a little bit more. And yeah, starting with the darkest, so W3, and then I blend it out a bit with the W1, and then I'll go back in with W00 and blend that. And if I felt the need, I would take my colorless blender, the 0, and blend it even more if I felt I needed to, but I didn't with this. I thought it was fine with the W00. And again, doesn't need to be perfect. I just like having that little bit of shading here and there to finish it off. And I really like the warm gray markers for this one, and doing this card, it reminded me that I need to refill these. I use them a lot. So once I'm done coloring my image, I'm going to get on to the rest of the card. So the sketch, I always just snap a picture from my computer with my phone. So the picture quality is crap, but I can have my phone right in front of me so I can refer back to it if I need to make sure I kind of get the sketch. I'm one of those people that's pretty OCD when it comes to sketches and layouts, and I follow them pretty closely. Yeah, it's just the way I am. When it's a challenge, it's hard for me to kind of think out of the box and really, especially for a layout anyway. That's how I see it, so that's how I'm going to do it. So I'm using the pattern papers from the Doodlebug Easter Parade 12x12 pack that I showed forever ago in a haul video. And I had cut down some My Favorite Things daffodil cardstock to 5 1/4 inches square. And then the strips of paper I cut to like 5 1/8 long. And then the width of them, I honestly just eyeballed, and it was just really good eyeballing this time that they ended up like being spaced evenly in the right size. That doesn't usually happen very often. I'm pretty good at eyeballing things, but I'm usually not this good. Today was one of those few days where things were coming together, you know, and I wasn't having to redo things and recut and just mess around constantly. Like, this card just worked. So once I had everything adhered, I stamped a sentiment from my Hopped Up sentiment set along the bottom. I thought that was kind of cute to go with this image. And then I had some yellow twill ribbon in my stash. I've had a lot of people mention that lately, like, oh, I don't use ribbon or pattern paper. I need to go back to making cards the old way that I used to. Yeah, styles kind of changed. I go back and forth. I love making cards like this with ribbon and embellishments and pattern papers, and then other times I like making them more simple or just changing it up. Yeah, I'm kind of all over the place. I don't really have, I guess, a distinct style. At least it doesn't feel like it. Anyway, I found this twill in my stash, and I just attached it to the main image with my little Tim Holtz tiny attacher, which is super cute. And then I pulled out some Doodlebug, the bright glitter sprinkles, which are fabulous. And I always, every time I use them, like any of their glitter ones, I always wish I'd bought like 10 packs of them, because I never want to run out because they're so pretty. So I adhered a few of those to the card, and then the card base itself is a 5 1/2 inch by 11 inch piece of cardstock that I scored at 5 1/2. So it's a 5 1/2 inch square card. And before I adhered the main, like the card front, I'm going to finish off the inside just to make things easier. So I inked up the same little image again with some Memento Cantaloupe ink. Just a nice light yellow ink, and I purposely stamped it higher up on the inside of the card. I wanted to add this little strip of the bunny pattern paper just because I thought it was cute. So stamped another sentiment from my Hopped Up set before I adhere this pattern paper. And I needed to trim it down just a little bit more because I didn't want it to cover the little birdies on the bottom, because the sentiment kind of goes with those. So, for my best peep, I just thought it was cute. So I'm going to trim that down with my trimmer, add some adhesive to this and then pop that onto the bottom of my card. And sorry, again, I didn't realize I was kind of like out of frame here. When I really get into a groove, I don't even bother looking up at the viewfinder on my camera, and sometimes it's just dumb luck that I'm actually in frame. So, yeah. Anywho, now to finish off the outside of the card, I'm going to adhere the main card front here to the card base. And then, of course, I cannot leave it without adding a little bit more bling. So I just grabbed my clear Wink of Stella and went over all various parts of the image, the ears and the daffodil and her dress and the egg. And I ended up actually going over everything kind of twice just to give it some extra sparkle. And then you can kind of also see like the sparkle of those doodlebug sprinkles, like so fun. Like obsessed with those. So once that's done, that is it. So as always, if you're interested in any of the products I use, all that kind of stuff, there's links below the video to my blog post. There's links to all the supplies used. So just check out the description box below. Thank you guys so much for watching, subscribing, and thumbs upping my videos and all the comments. I really, really appreciate it. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.